Okay, this ponder is going to be fun. We're going to finish up our scripture responsive menu that we started. If you remember last week when we clicked those 3 bars for our menu, nothing really happened. So we're going to go ahead and finish that up. So you'll want to open up your responsive.html and responsive.css that you created last time. And you can go over, we're going to be going over some of these DOM principles that we've seen before, as well as seeing a little bit of CSS animation, which we really haven't covered yet. So you will be given the code for that one. But let's just take a look at what it's going to look like. When we click it, it's going to open up the menu, and you'll see that little bit of animation as well with the X. But that's what's going to be happening. All right. So in order for us to do this, our menu didn't quite look like that. If we take a look at what it looks like right now, and we had it down to the mobile size. Oh, I've forgotten. I took off the display none here, so I think you will have display none. But if you look at right now, it doesn't look like they're going in the video. They were going on top of each other, not going across. So we need to change that CSS, and that's just all CSS, no JavaScript yet. But you may have it just completely, and it will probably look like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and make those changes in the CSS. So we haven't even started JavaScript yet with the click event, but we're just gonna make our menu look a little better so that it will look nice at mobile first. So the reason I'd taken that out is because I did want to have it in its own class. Because really later when we think about when we're going to be clicking that, the menu's either going to show or hide. So I kind of want to make that it's in its own class and that we can manipulate in JavaScript to turn it on and off. So I'm going to go ahead and put that display none here, and then make sure, that I give that class of .hide to my nav. And then I won't be messing with any of the other CSS that was inside nav A. It will just do the hiding and showing all by itself. Okay, the other things we needed to do, in fact, let's just turn this off for a minute so we can kind of see our menu there. And let's go ahead and add a few different things. We're going to go ahead and say display block, because right now they're display inline, if you didn't have that display none working. So we wanted them to all come down like that, and maybe yours was already that way, that's fine. And then just so it looks like the example, we wouldn't have to do this, but we could do the text align center to get them to center. We could take the underline off if we wanted to with text decoration none. We could also put that border that we saw in the example. It's got a little bit of a border on top of all of these. So if we wanted to do that, we could add that border, and I'm just going to put it on the top so it's not all the way around each one. And just very subtle, maybe a 1 pixel solid gray color. Okay, so that looks a little bit more like our example. So not really any computational thinking going on other than just making it look like what that example looked like. Okay, but now let's go ahead and look at how we would finish this with JavaScript. Because even now with that showing, it's not going to do anything if I click this. We have to add that click event and run some JavaScript code to get that to work. Okay, so I did uncomment that display none, that's why it went away. And our menu, our nav does have that class. All right, let's also do a little bit with the animation there. So I'm going to go down to the bars here. All right, so in order to get those bars to move, we have 3 bars. We're going to do a little bit of CSS. So let's go back to our code here. I'm going to copy this code, and I'm going to put it right here because it kind of goes with the ones right above it. And you'll notice it's got a .change class going on there. And we don't really have a .change in our HTML, but again, we can use JavaScript to add that in. Okay, also, what's going to happen is when this dot change is added to those bars, the class change is added, it's going to move our bars and rotate them. And it's going to hide one of them because the X is only 2 lines and we had 3 lines originally. So you'll notice this one moves opposite. So one will rotate one way and one will rotate the other way. Translate has an XY property and it's affecting the Y line there. This is new, and so we haven't really covered it, but it's just kind of a fun little introduction to CSS animation, which I absolutely love. It's one of my passions. I also don't want that to happen just like super sharply. So we're going to actually put a little bit of a transition here. And we're going to say, hey, whenever these bars something happens to them, they move or something happens to them, I want it to take 0.4 seconds so that it's not really harsh. I like to put a 0 there. Okay. And we'll see how that works here in just a minute. Anyway, so that's kind of new information, adding the transition to the dot bars and then adding these new things that will happen to the bars when the change class is added to them, which we haven't seen yet. We're going to do that in JavaScript. Okay, so I think our CSS and our one little bit in HTML, adding that class, is done. Now let's think about the JavaScript with this one. Let's go back to our computational thinking. And I'm not going to just give the code because I want you to think through this. I want you to think, okay, when the button gets clicked is when things are happening. So I know I'm going to need to target that button somehow. And I know things are happening with the menu. It's hiding and showing. So I know I'm going to have to target that menu as well. I'm going to have to listen for that click and run a function when it's clicked that's going to add or remove that hide class so that it can hide and show. And I'm also going to need to add and remove that change class so that my cute little menu button can go from the 3 bars to the X. So that's what I'm going to be thinking through. I can even go further into pseudocode and start thinking about, what kind of syntax might be close to what all these things are going to be happening. But you really do need to sit and think through all of this. When it's an X and they click it, then it's going to, remove the class. When it's 3 lines, it's going to add it. So is there something that would add and remove depending on what it already has? Those kind of things you need to think about before you sit down to code this JavaScript. All right, so let's make that JavaScript file. And since the other 2 were called responsive, I'm just going to go ahead and give that the same name. Make sure you have linked it here. I added that earlier. Sorry, you probably don't have that, but you'll want to add your script tag linking to that responsive.js and put a defer if you're going to put it in the head section. Okay, so we're going to target both the menu and the navigation, and I'm going to put these into to begin with, and I'm going to use query selector. And I can take a look at my HTML and say, okay, the button that I'm looking at has a class of menu-btn, and my nav does have a class of hide, but that hide is going to come and go. So I'm really just going to use nav to target that one. All right, so I'm going to say document query selector, and I'm going to make sure I use that class of menu.btn, and then another one to look at I'll just call it menu. I'll use query selector again, but if it was an ID, you could use get element ID and other options. But I'm just going to target the nav, not the hide, because that hide is going to come and go according to our JavaScript here in a minute. All right, so now I'm going to take that button and I'm going to be listening for a click at event listener. So when the user clicks that, this is going to happen. Now we could put an anonymous function here, but I'm going to make a call to a function, and I'm going to call it toggle menu. And then I'm going to create that function. And when that happens, we're going to want to check and see if the hide is already there, that class hide is already in our nav element, then we want to remove it. If it's already removed, we want to add it. And the best method for that is called that toggle method. And we're dealing with the class that we're toggling. So I'm going to say menu.classList toggle the class hide. And I don't need a dot because I know we're targeting a class by this property name here. Okay. And then I also want that button, the 3 little lines, that button that has those 3 bars in it. I also want it to have the change class put onto it. So what's going to be happening is not necessarily the bars are going to get that class, but this button is going to get an additional class, and it's going to be called change. So when that class of change with all the bars inside of them will do these things. So we're going to take a look at that button so it can change to an X, and we're going to add that class list. Again, toggle on and off, change. Okay, now if we take a look, it's going to go ahead and give the change. My X is a little ski-wampus there, so I'm going to come in here and change this pixel down a little bit. Okay, that looks more like an X. Okay, so 2 things happening here. The hide and show are hiding and showing our nav, and the change is getting added to that menu button. And in addition, then it's going to trickle down to those bars, and it's going to make one disappear and the other 2 rotate, which is pretty cool. All right, so there we have just a little bit of an example of how to make our responsive menu work for us.